We live in a self help economy. Self guided is what the world seems to be constantly reminding us that is the way. Whether that's business, relationships, or personal development, the focus is always on the self. Self being the keyword here. So we fired the therapist. We got rid of the middleman and took matters into our own hands. And when it comes to psychedelic therapy, many sources are also directing us onto a self or solo journey. So, should you go guided or should you go solo? How do you know what's right for you?
Welcome to the Shift Happens podcast, where we believe that it only takes a small shift to make a radical difference. Whether that's a shift in perspective, a shift in mindset, or a shift in behavior, or in the way that we relate to each other and the world around us, join us each week as we discuss the art and science of meaningful transformations. From relationships to neuroscience and psychedelics, we explore existing and emerging tools that help us gain agency over our life. So without further ado, let's let magic unfold. Let's make some shit happen.
Though not legalized or regulated, we have access to most type of psychedelic substances today. And magic truffles, for example, are in the Netherlands even sold legally. So why would anyone go through the trouble of finding, why would anyone consider paying for someone to become or to be their facilitator or therapist when you can simply take a trip, consume something, and take a trip from the comfort of your own couch? What is preventing you from becoming like Terrence McKenna, the hero of your own journey, consumes the hero dose alone, in the dark, in silence, with your eyes closed? Why would you need to be assisted if you could do a self-guided journey? Now, self-growth, self-improvement, self-guided. In our search for happiness and well-being, all the roads we are being told are always leading to self. Looking for happiness? Find it within yourself. Need more wisdom? It's all inside of you. Want to talk to God? Talk to yourself. Collectively, we have become more self-centered than ever before. And why is that? Now, self-centeredness has been actually our Achilles heel since humanity developed the concept of self. And that's the result of our intellectual development. So our self-concept is nothing less, nothing more than the thought of I. It is also nothing less or nothing more than ego. Because ego is simply the thought I. And by thinking of ourselves as a self or as a I, we see ourselves different from the things in our environment and different from other people. But why is this important to highlight when we are trying to make a choice on whether or not we should have a solo session? So self-growth, and with it the proclivity or the urge to take the power into our own hands, is a very logical, organic step in our collective psychological maturation. On the scale of psychospiritual maturity, we as a society are now progressing from dependence to independence. And that's only healthy. Dependency in the context of what we're discussing today, so literally the dependency on being dependent on a psychologist, therapist, or a psychiatrist, has to date not brought us what we were looking for. On the contrary, it feels or it seems like we are more mentally unwell than ever before. And as the world is changing at unprecedented speed, so is our demand on the capabilities of our own psyche to cope, but also then, therefore, on the therapist to help us cope with those changes. But the therapists are still running on outdated software, and the education system is still taking too long to figure out how to update that system. And the update is too cumbersome to roll out. So basically, we had no choice but to take matters into our own hands. So what we did, we fired the therapist, we employed the self, and we're doing the work on ourselves. Before we used to outsource well-being, now we self-source it. And in doing so, we have actually lowered the threshold to psychotherapy, made psychology go from an exact science to an open source and a mainstream practice. And when thinking of this psycho-spiritual maturity that I just mentioned, I like to think of 7 different stages of development. And specifically, I like to think of them in relation to how they evolved around the concept of I, or how did the concept of I mature in that process. So we start with stage 1, which is I call symbiosis. This is where there is no I without you. The self is kind of like the fetus in complete symbiosis with the body and the being of the mother. It cannot exist without her. Then second stage is dependence, where the I progresses from there is no I without you to I need you to survive. So that's like the infant who needs the mother for survival purposes. Third stage is independence. This is where we realize that we are separate beings and we have ability to take care of ourselves. This is where we rebel against what has been actually providing us the source of care and nurture to date. So then we go from I need you to I don't need you, or actually the I progresses from needing to I not needing. The stage that follows independence is intradependence, where the ego or the I goes from I don't need you to I am all I need. So this is the adult who becomes self-sufficient and develops, in a sense, the mother within. The stage that follows intradependence is interdependence, where we realize that we don't need the other, but we love them and we like to have them around us. So the ego goes from I am all I need to I love you. I love you progresses into I am you. So that's union, the stage of union. And then I am you progresses to oneness, where there is no I. And this, in a sense, kind of is a model that I like to think of, or I use when I think of enlightenment. So where on this scale do you think our psycho-spiritual maturity level as a humanity currently is? We are slowly kind of transitioning from independence to where the I doesn't need anyone, to intradependence, to where we say, I am all I need. So this is what the self society is trying to reflect to us. We are at that stage collectively. We are going from independence to intradependence, so complete reliance on the self. But the next stage that follows intradependence is interdependence. And this is where we realize that we are actually social beings in relationship to others, whether we try to separate or differentiate ourselves from them, or whether we rebel or accept them, or whether we embrace them, or whether we love them or not. In every single aspect, we are relating to ourselves in as far as we're relating to another. So only after we get to that point can we progress then into union and into oneness. So this is how we progress to ultimate enlightenment and self-awareness. Actually, the awareness of no self. So what is important to note here is that although progression, or this specific progression, is not linear, each stage needs to be experienced and felt individually. That's important because in order for us to process something and to integrate it into our psyche, we need to know it, hear it, touch it, see it, feel it, all on a somatic level. Because only then we can, or our brain can integrate it as a learned experience. It's akin to learning a new language. Like if you knew all the words and if you learned the whole vocabulary by heart, that does not make you a speaker. First, you would have to have the felt experience of combining the words into making sentences, then using your voice to produce sounds or make those sentences vocal. Then you would have to do so consistently for a longer duration of time in order to feel confident enough that you are actually doing something or speaking the language, and eventually progressing to receiving feedback that you are understood by someone who speaks the language. So experience takes time, it takes dedication, it takes discipline to get to that point. That's like step 1, step 2, step 3, and then you reach your goal. And this is what Ray Kurzweil, the head of engineering at Google, called linear progression. We used, where I would like to use the 30 steps example to explain the implication of exponential change as he described it. So he said that if you would go to 30 by following 1, 2, 3, that's what linear change is. But if you take the same amount of steps, but each one of them is exponential, you would go 2, 4, and then by step 30, you are at 1 billion. So 30 linear steps gets you to 30. 30 exponential steps gets you to 1 billion. And why is this important? Well, our world today is changing at an exponential speed. Technology is, in this case, a super good example to exemplify what exponential change means. And I'm paraphrasing here futurist Jason Silva to exemplify it. Your phone is 1,000 times more powerful than what 40 years ago used to be a supercomputer the size of a building. But it's 1 million times smaller. In linear terms, 1,000 times more powerful would actually mean 1,000 times bigger than a computer that is the size of a building. But what used to be the size of a building today fits in your pocket and is 1,000 times more powerful. So the same stands for therapy. What 20 years ago used to take 15 years of discipline and hard work today fits into a pill and can be accomplished 1,000 times faster, and sometimes in even less than one night. So what makes psychedelics so efficient? If we are to use our technology analogy, it sounds funny, therapy is a linear progression. Psychedelics make therapy exponential. So what does this have to do with your choice of doing psychedelics solo or assisted? Well, it has nothing and everything to do with it. Imagine that you are the operator of that giant supercomputer that has the size of a building. And then imagine that overnight somebody came and wiped that building off the face of the earth and placed a 1 million times smaller, 1,000 times more powerful device called iPhone into your hands without even bothering to explain to you how it works. So you have no idea how to switch it on. You don't know how to swipe. You don't know how to navigate. You have no idea how to open and close all those apps that you have or what they do. So you would need then to spend at least a couple of months, if not years, on educating yourself just to get to know your phone or to get to the basic level of being able to use that device. Now, more than 5 billion people in the world now have this kind of mobile devices, one type or another, and I think it's half of those people have smartphones. But we only use 5% of the functionalities that those devices come equipped with. So what's the point, you could ask yourself, in having them if they're of no use to you? Actually, your system would be so much faster if we could just strip it down to the basics and just leave it down to only the things that you need, the functionalities that you need, instead of having all those apps and software clogging your system up. But back to psychedelic therapy, I digressed a bit there. 15 years of therapy in one night, that's actually a radical upgrade. And the difference between someone who is able to benefit from all those functionalities and one who is simply overwhelmed by them and discards them as imagination or incoherent, meaningless rubble is our ability to understand, to process, and to integrate that change. This is when the change becomes a felt experience. And here's where the midwife comes in. A psychedelic facilitator is a critical key component in anyone's psychedelic journey, even after having taken countless solo journeys, even after having facilitated trips for other people. I still go guided at least once a year. And why do I do that? Well, because I am aware of the fact that the eye cannot see itself. And I can only know myself by virtue of having something or someone else to relate to. And a guide is key and critical to that. Have a good week.